This is Create the Next from ProCFO Partners, where every week we explore strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help today's businesses put their financial picture in context.
Welcome back to Create the Next. I'm Chris Mitliff, and Steve Berlin is joining us today. Steve, welcome, and I'm looking forward to a conversation because we haven't covered this before on Create the Next, and we're talking about franchising. And you've got a lot of experience in this space, and I'm interested in your experience because you can approach it from multiple perspectives. One as a franchisee, but also as a CFO. I'm interested in your thoughts on that. But I think one of my first questions is why franchising? Why is that an avenue you went down? And maybe what are the characteristics that you have that made that a good fit for you? Who does franchising? Who is that person?
Great. Thank you first so much for having me today. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm excited to speak with you. So why franchising? Well, first of all, I've been a CFO. I'm a CPA, worked in finance my entire career, and wanted to actually own my own business at some point. You know, the last time I owned my own business was probably cutting lawns back in junior high school and high school, or delivering newspapers.
Perfect.
Yeah. But, you know, you do read how so many, especially small new business startups fail. And I figured, you know, franchising has a good track record of success if you pick the right one, if you pick one that you're passionate about, and you have a support team. You don't have to recreate the wheel. You know, they'll handle a lot of marketing for you. They'll handle a lot of the operations for you, or at least prepare an operations manual for you to follow. You don't have to create this all by yourself. And although my background is in finance, you know, I don't really know, you know, I've learned how to work with the internet and SEO marketing and but they provide expertise in that you might otherwise not have at your fingertips.
So when you, I imagine there were some, maybe not, there were some lessons learned along the way, some trial and error, wow, that's an obstacle that I wish I could have avoided, or now that I know to avoid again. Like what are some of the things that as a franchisee down the road, like with experience, what are some of the, like, I wish I would have known this? Like, what are some of those best practices, or some of those, some of that kind of deep knowledge that makes it a rewarding experience instead of just kind of a precarious one?
The biggest and probably the most expensive lesson I learned is know your market. Okay, so we opened up, it was a indoor trampoline park, and we opened up in a market that was, you know, we first thought it was going to be a problem because it was lower to middle income, and maybe they didn't have the money to spend on a recurring basis. Well, it turned out that was the best decision we made, because in that particular area, they don't have all that disposable income. They don't have their children playing 5 different sports, playing hockey and soccer and lacrosse, tennis, gymnastics. They're basically focused on one item that their kids can do. And they don't necessarily have babysitters. Okay, so they're coming to the park as a family. Right. Then we said, all right, everything's going great in this location. Let's go to another market. And that market we were excited about. We said, all right, this is a much, much wealthier market, you know, extremely high to upper middle class, if not, you know, the 1%ers. And what we learned was they do have the opportunity and the cash flow to be able to over program their children. So they weren't coming to us on a regular basis because they had soccer practice, they had tutoring, they had babysitters. So the parents weren't coming. They would drop them off and leave. And the disparity in the revenue and the what we call jumper count was significant. And, you know, we had started when the franchisor was relatively new. And when they advised us on the new market, they said, oh, this is great. It's got the, you know, the heat map of the disposable income and average median wages. You're going to kill it there. And then we were the trial and error that caused them to rethink their heat maps and what's considered a good market for other franchisees down the road.
That is
so we ended up, fortunately, we ended up selling that to another franchisee, actually. But, you know, you don't know what you don't know when first going in. So what I would always recommend is talk to as many franchisees in all different markets in all parts of the country to get a better understanding of what they consider a good market for them.
I mean, I love the advice of know your market. That's straight up 101, right? A business 101. But what did that then, how did that inform your sort of, did you lean deeper into then that previous location or thoughts about how to amplify that or something, or how did that change your perspective as a franchisee? How did that shift maybe from an expansion mindset to a more focused, or what was the outcome of that for you?
So what I learned was, we were actually third to market. When we first opened, indoor trampolines were pretty new. Okay. And there's a huge barrier of entry as well. So we said, all right, we're third to market. That actually was a good thing because we were able to design our park in such a way that the other parks that were within 20 miles of us didn't have. We had a big open space for parents to be able to sit down, relax, watch their kids jump. Some parents jump too. But you want to make sure that it's a guest experience for the people that come to visit your park. You don't want it to be so crammed and crowded. And, people second guessed us because we had one of the largest parks in the network. But it turned out that it was great for us. We were always the top 1 to 3 leading park in gross revenues. But you want to make sure that you find out how others are failing and what their risks are. I mean, we were on Long Island. It's a pretty large market. In fact, I spoke to another franchisee, and their rent was less than our pizza budget. So you have to be able to understand volume and where you want to lead the team and the company should you want to exit at any point in time as well.
So you had kind of a second and third mover advantage. Did you do some recon on others that were already established I imagine that the franchise sort of says, here's how it goes. But did you kind of go in there and say, well, look, this is a thing we could do differently, or look at that, this could be a problem or an opportunity, or what was involved in that, just kind of boots on the ground for you as you got started?
Yeah, so we were a little bit of a disadvantage because when I first contacted them, there were only 18 owners at the time. By the time we opened up our park a year and a half later, we were number 54, and there's well over 300 now. But I didn't have many people to speak to, and the ones that I did were open for mostly less than a year. So it was a bit of a leap of faith. If I was to open up another franchise, I would not be one of the first investors. In fact, many of these franchisors have these founding member discounts for the initial fee. I understand why they do that. And if you're really, really passionate about it and you do your homework, I just don't think there's enough data for you to make an educated decision. Fortunately, it worked out for us, except for that instance with learning the hard way about market. But you want to make sure that there's a track record. And in any franchise, what's available to you is something called an FDD, which is a franchise disclosure document. And what that is, it basically gives you all the information, the background of the franchisor. There's something called an Item 19 that gives you the financial disclosures, which can vary widely as to the amount of detail. So you have access to information, but nothing replaces the questions to the franchisees that are already in the marketplace. And then the more, the better.
Now, this is interesting because we're getting into this territory of cross expertise. So how did you bring your CFO's lens or your financial expertise to that? Not everybody has that. Not everybody has that advantage to be able to look at a scenario, ask deeper questions, look at something for the third or fourth level down. How was that for you? How did that inform the decisions that you made?
So that was actually very key because the first thing you do is you find a franchisee or franchisor or industry that you're passionate about, and you find out what you might like to do. That's the simple part. The hard part is getting funding. And in order to get funding, you need to prepare a business model. Now, the FDD is a good place to start because it gives backgrounds, but you need to know the population. You need to know everything from competition to new innovations and track record. So, some of the ProCFO partners can certainly help anyone with a business model, but my finance background allowed me to do that pretty seamlessly. And then we ended up getting, like most people probably do, is get a SBA loan. Though recently, I think first half of 2024, they lost around $275 million, the SBA did. So in the current climate with all the scrutiny and federal agencies, who knows how that will tighten up or not? I mean, that remains to be seen. But you need to have a business model, not only for lending, but as a roadmap for you to follow as you go on with your business.
In some ways, that's that they kind of require this scaffolding or framework is an advantage. A lot of businesses start without any of that, and they figured out the hard way as they go. Has that informed? I don't know. Now, do you take that to work with you with other clients? Is that driven has that turned the screw tighter for you to be like, we need to know this and this and this before we can make these decisions? How has that changed as you've gone forward as a business person? How has that shift been for you?
Yeah, so I actually was fortunate with the ownership of the franchise. That was actually attractive to many other companies that I work with, because you've been in their shoes. You know what it's like not to sleep at night, to worry about payroll, to worry about, in this instance, people who might break a leg and they want to sue you. So you need to have all the necessary precautions in place. And where does that start? It starts with either a business model. Most companies are, well on their way past the business model stage, but it does require you to plan in advance. What does that mean? Have a budget. Well, when do you do your budget? And who do you speak to when you do your budget? Are you speaking to the department heads? As a CFO, that's all I did, was speak to them directly so that I can then report to the CEO what the outlook looks like. And budgets are great. But usually by the first week in January, something happens and the budgets go awry. So now you run into forecasting. So what is a forecast? And I've met CEOs that didn't really understand the difference. They said, how are we doing against budget? I said, the budget, and now we're in April. I said, the budget it's a rocky road for the budget, but now let's focus on the forecast. The forecast is, what do we know now that we didn't know when the budget was prepared? And what do we know not just in the last quarter, but what is the next quarter? What does the pipeline of business look like? What is the success rate of that pipeline for sales? So it's always staying ahead of where sometimes the CEO is out strategizing, which is what they should be, and meeting new clients and building business. But at the end of the day, you have to come back and be able to prepare, not just for the next month, the next quarter, sometimes the next year. If you're looking to sell the business down the road, maybe it's a family-owned business, you need to have the vision for what an investor is going to look for. And what do they need for that? And that's a whole list of due diligence that you need to have ready on hand and constantly updating, because you never know when that opportunity may come about. In fact, we were about 8 years into our franchises post-COVID. We came back really, really strong. And the franchisor was owned by private equity. They wanted to buy our park. And my partner at the time, we were getting very saturated on Long Island with recreation centers, specifically trampoline parks. So we said it was a good time. But had we not had our budgets, our forecasts, all of our key vendor contracts in place, it would have taken months instead of it taking 3 or 4 weeks.
I love everything you're sharing, and you're absolutely, for me, on the beam when you talk about the value that you've been able to bring to other organizations, because it's not conceptual or theoretical to you. You've been there, you know what's going on. But this conversation then, as you're shifting into selling, Nelson and I were just talking about build your business, run your business like you're going to sell it, because all of that, all the time, is good to have. All of that stuff is good to have. So what was that like for you? I guess when you sold the more affluent community, what was that experience like, different from the private equity buying it from you? Did you know a lot more the second time, or was it smoother or better?
Well, unfortunately, I wouldn't say it was a fire sale, but we gave a pretty big discount to another franchisee that owned a park in another state, and he wanted a home for a relative to run the business. Sure enough, about a year after that, another big competitor opened up less than 5 miles from him. he ended up having to close. And that's happening a lot, especially in the recreation business. When we went in, and this is a key issue for any franchisee, what's the barriers of entry? Well, for a trampoline park, it's pretty high. You need to have a pretty big building with high rent, with certain specifications and, column spacing for the trampolines. We said, we shouldn't have to worry too much. But sure enough, these big businesses come in. They open up these parks, or especially on Long Island, a lot of the grocery store chains didn't do well. So they closed. So all these buildings and big box stores were now available that weren't when we first started. So the barrier of entry became less of an obstacle for newcomers to come in.
That's interesting. When you think about the variables that can impact decisions, I wouldn't have thought of that. Like, well, the anchor tenant at the mall closed, which means this enormous square footage is available, which makes it a lot easier for whomever. Do you find that that there's a cyclical kind of perspective with this? I'm thinking about like escape rooms, which were super hot for a minute, and I'm not sure they are, or paintball or laser tag or any of these things that for a hot minute, they're like, this is all anybody wants to do. And then they aren't. Is there an advantage to kind of, I don't know, seeing where the pulse is going to be instead of where it is? Or how did you manage that as an expert?
That's an interesting question, because we had literally, when we opened up, the landlord built the building for us, and it was 40,000 square feet. And most other parks were in that 25 to 30,000. So I had said to the franchisor, I said, listen, this is a tremendous building. I know we're trampolines, but maybe we can introduce something else. Maybe we would have rock climbing in the back corner or something else. And they said, no, we want to focus just on trampolines. So we ended up building what literally was the largest open space trampoline area in the country. I mean, we had dodgeball courts, there were basketball, but the just free jump was the largest in the country. It was almost the size of a football field, just short of a football field. And then sure enough, 3 years later, the franchisor says, you know what, we have to expand. We have to have different offerings. What do they offer? Rock climbing. What do they offer? So it was, and many other things as well. So, one question you want to have, you mentioned escape rooms, or these smash centers are coming up, or axe throwing, all these things that are hot for a little while. Okay. You want to be able to have add-ons, and you also want to be able to ask the franchisor, you have to follow their rules. I mean, that's one thing. It's a downside and it's a positive. If you're very creative and innovative, you want to have a little bit more free will to be able to do things. One franchisor wanted to put in a mechanical bull. They said, no, that's not our distinction. We're trampolines. And sure enough, all these other centers opened up with zip lining, and they had bumper cars, and the entire model changed. And here we are with a 40,000 square foot facility. So we were faced with the choice of retrofitting the park, adding in basketball courts and other items, zip lines and such, and spend $400,000 or $500,000 to do so, or sell to our private equity firm. So that's kind of what was behind the decision.
That is,
you have to look forward to your product, or maybe the technology will change. There's all these virtual reality centers opening up, and that technology changes, every other month, it seems like. So you have to prepare for what's coming down the road, and how you can pivot, and also have the capital to pivot.
And there's a tension there between what you think is a great idea, what you'd like to do, and what I guess you're kind of allowed to do, which is maybe leads me into kind of my closing question or scenario, which is I might, as a franchisee, assume that I'm getting a lot of sort of financial sort of expertise or complementary skill sets or something. Is that true? Like, you had this CFO perspective that you were able to analyze everything. Should I be looking for, obviously we do fractional CFO stuff, but what's the advantage to having kind of a partner there versus what you can expect to get kind of in a box from your franchisor?
It's funny. When we had our first discovery day, and he said, what do you think you're buying? So we said, the concept of trampolines. He goes, no, you're buying the brand name. And that's very true. Now, do they provide other services? Of course they do. They provide your marketing materials, your signage, your operations manual, best practices, safety for certainly in parks. But you are kind of left to your own devices for financing your operations. they will not help you. They can advise you where to go to look for finances. They may have bank relationships and so forth, or a particular SBA lender that they've had success with. But you need to be able to create your mark in your location. Like, one thing we found is super critical for us, that they then indoctrinated into the overall network, was we came up with a special needs training, because we were finding that a lot of our guests, whether it was autism or some other special needs, were overwhelmed when they came into our park. And, first, to be able to just spot someone with a special needs is not always so easy. And, safety was always a primary concern. So we actually had all of our team members, every single employee, get trained by a company on how to interact and engage with special needs. Does that make money for us? No. But you're giving back to the community. And that is sometimes more valuable than raising the price by 50 cents, because one parent talks to another parent, or they hear a horror story at another similar park where it was just awful and they had terrible experience. And or we have fundraising. Fundraisers don't really make a lot of money for us. It's on behalf of the local fire department, police department, Boomer Esiason's Foundation. We had a big event for. You want to make sure that you give back to the community, even if it's not a moneymaker. So that is one key thing that I brought to the franchisor, and actually did here I am speaking about trampolines and special needs when I was a CFO my whole career. I was like, how did this happen? But, you kind of learn on the job. But one thing I would say that we always emphasize more, we call our customers guests. And we would always say, we had a big banner in our break room for all the team members. Guests may forget what you said, but they never forget how you made them feel. Okay, and that's a mantra that doesn't matter what business you're in. First of all, you can be a CFO and have that mantra with department heads that you speak to, or a CEO with your employees. That was something that I found a revelation that I didn't have as a CFO in traditional, finance departments.
Steve Berlin, who just shared a lot about who he is as a human being, in addition to the business aspects. What a great story. I feel like there's a lot more to unpack. I hope you'll come back and we can start to pick some of these things apart, including what you just shared. I think there's a huge angle about sort of experience and the customer experience that is necessary for us to explore, maybe more than ever. And you've got some interesting perspective with that. Thanks so much for your expertise and your generosity with it today. We really appreciate it, and looking forward to our next conversation.
Chris, thank you so much. I was excited for this, and would love to do more with you. This was great.
All right, buddy. Take care.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Thanks for watching, and a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one today. Visit ProCFOPartners.com for more strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help you put your business's financial picture in context.